Hi everyone, Matt Diener again from Screen Producers Australia. Thank you so much for your engagement with us over the last, for a long time, but certainly as we roll out these spa takeaway sessions. These are not without the challenges. There's a lot of people using the internet at the moment, and we're trying our best to make sure the feeds of what we're doing is working. So bear with us over the next few minutes at least. Hopefully we're going to have a very good chat very shortly, but and apologies for the delay. We're having some technical problems as everyone is using the one system at the moment. We're really excited about these exercises because they're a way of engaging. If there are questions you have, feed them into the Facebook video. Someone will come and talk to me about that so that I can ask our special guest, Emile Sherman. Thank you very much for being a part of this, Emile. You've been such an important person in the producing landscape for so many years, and it's a great opportunity to talk to you with everything that's going on with COVID-19. You are physically, I assume, not in your office. It looks like you're in a spare room.
I'm at home.
Your place, at home, and bunkered down. And I wanted to, look, I thought this would be a really good chance to just, why I wanted to cover this was to talk a bit about what you had going at the time, 3 weeks ago. You had a lot of things going on, I know, and you had the drama of shutting down a shoot in New Zealand, and you've had a number of other things that have been put on ice or scotched. I wanted to get a chance to talk about what that meant for you, and really, but also how you're pivoting. What are you doing differently? What can you do as an overview? And then let's talk a bit about the industry in the long-term sense. So that's how I wanted to break up the conversation, but there'll be lots of things to talk about and then maybe some questions. So first up, how are you going? How's the team? And how does it feel being 3 weeks into this mess? And maybe give us a sense of where you're at, but also, the changes that you've had to do since 3 weeks ago.
Well, first, thanks a lot for having me on this show. As you know, there's a really massive echo here, so I have to turn my volume right down, yes. So I'm not going to hear you easily. It's also great to finally wear a shirt. I'm obviously got my pajamas underneath, but at least I'm smart on the top side. It's been horrific time for everybody, and we're all just trying to make sense of the landscape and trying to keep on top of the changes which have been happening day to day. Feels like over the last week things have settled down a little bit more, and that we're starting to take views as to what the future is going to hold. For our industry in particular, we've been hit incredibly hard, and particularly all the cast crew who go job to job. And the government, doesn't take them into account in the same way that they take regular employees into account, and to end up on unemployment benefits rather than being supported in a more structural way is obviously incredibly painful for so many people. So I just think, recognizing that massive rupture in our industry, for people and their livelihoods, and their families and their mortgages is just an incredibly difficult time, as well as for businesses. Yes, in the end, I can probably most helpful to talk about the effect on production companies because it's the side I know most about. We were in a great position leading into this with The Power of the Dog, halfway through its shoot, the Jane Campion film in New Zealand. We had a big TV series called The North Quarter, BBC One, with Andrew Hay writing, directing, which had one more week left in it. And that had to, along with The Power of the Dog, suspend for the moment. And also a few productions really giving up pre-production, particularly a big Apple TV series, which was going to be the motor for our company. So it's come at a difficult time. We wish we would have got through one more month. That would have put us on better footing. But, fundamentally, our finances are in reasonable shape and we can weather it for a time at least. It does mean we need to pivot and focus on some other things, as you say. We can be and need to keep planning for the time where the runway opens again. And, it's a production business. It's not easy to mount production. You know how hard that is. You can't just open your doors and say, okay, let's start shooting again, guys. Yeah. There's a massive process of putting it together, getting a television or production together is a miracle. I think if anyone knows the business will testify to that. You know, in the normal course, massive exercise in mutual trust, because you often, or generally, closing the financing and the contracts after a lot of money has been spent. So now we're going to have all the normal contingencies of trying to get tasks and the director available at the same time with the banks and the government funding and the pre-sales and the commissioning broadcasters. But then we also need insurance to decide to not exclude COVID-19.
Yes.
And obviously it's been used to, everyone just dropped COVID-19 with the hot potato in terms of exclusion and just can't mount a production. Unless you have very deep-pocketed financiers or broadcasters, SVODs, studios who are willing to take that risk. And I think things will pivot a little bit towards those big, deep-pocketed financiers who might be able to wear some of the risks. But still, there will be some real difficulties and challenges to mount production. Again, obviously, you mentioned the insurance and bond pricing in that risk. This is all before a vaccine and maybe even after if the virus mutates. Actors flying internationally, older cast and crew obviously and more easily affected, all the health and safety procedures. And then the possibility that some people will be immune and there might be laws that apply to those people. So it's a time for our business where we're going to bunker down on development. I think that if we don't do that, we may as well really all go home. So that development is the fuel of our industry. There's no point opening the runway again and not having projects
ready to
actually produce. We're going to put a lot of energy into development and continue to refine our production plan so that as soon as the runway opens, we're ready to take off.
In terms of what you were shutting down, do you have a sense, or you off the top of your head, how many people that no longer have jobs because of the productions that stopped or are in train? I'm imagining there are hundreds, and maybe then we can have a bit of a chat about the measures that have been introduced already by government, but maybe what else needs to be thought through. So just first up, how many people do you think that are no longer employed on your shows?
I mean, we were at the last chunk of the shoot on Power of the Dog, 70 crew plus cast, and the North Water the same. But the flow-on effects into post-production, which obviously now we're not in post-production, so we're not employing those people. Flow-on effects into pre-production onto our Apple series and pre-production onto a couple of TV series and a film that we were looking to mount here. So I think it's, we are in such a deeply connected world, aren't we? And I think it's clear that we're going to be going into a recession. Most young Australians don't remember the last recession. I do. I was in my 20s at the time. Yeah. But it really is an awful thing where you just realise how connected the economy is and how businesses that you think might be affected actually, like a virus, go on to affect a whole, every adjacent business, and that flows through, and you end up in a situation where things that you took for granted aren't there, and you're not quite sure how we got into that position. But we need to brace as well for that to potentially occur.
That way of describing this as a bit of a flow-on virus in all the business and employment layers is, I haven't really heard it described like that, but you're actually right. You're realising the ripple effect of one decision, and it was always the case when a production could get greenlit, what that meant in terms of hundreds and hundreds of jobs and all of the flow-on into people's lives, but also, let alone what we're doing culturally. I think one of the challenges, and you touched on it maybe when we were having a chat beforehand, is that the measures that have been introduced most recently that allowing people to retain employment don't really work for our sector all that well, because it depends on whether people are in employment all the time, but then if they happen to be just out of employment at the moment that the specific measure that they're talking about, I think it was the 1st of March, hits, then that doesn't mean that they'll be able to be treated as though they're employed. And our industry is so lumpy, and you would have maybe an opportunity to claim some of the measures that's there as a job retention exercise for some of your core staff. But if you were having a pretty amazingly bad period this time last year and you're having a relatively good time this year, then you won't be eligible because you won't be able to show the 30%. So the lumpy nature of the creative industries, both in jobs and everyone's businesses, is really quite a difficult exercise with what's been announced. It doesn't actually really work at the moment from what we can work out. I mean, it works for some people, but not everyone.
Yeah, I think that's right. We've always been an unusual business, probably what a lot of us like about it. It's not regular, but these situations certainly exacerbate that. I think, the intention has to be for our industry and the industries as a whole that, that we get people back to work as soon as possible.
Yes.
In a way that balances the health interest of the population, particularly older people, and that's the challenge. And at some point, I assume you have to focus on protecting the elderly and vulnerable, but open up the rest of the economy. And the question is at what point that will be. And, obviously people need a lot more planning that. But as a business, I think it is really prudent way we're approaching it is to plan for the reasonable worst case scenario. That planning, most important thing is to survive. You're never going to thrive unsurvive. So survival is key as a business, and really looking at what the worst case scenarios here. Obviously, there are worst cases that are just, so catastrophic for the world that there's no point planning for those typically.
Yes.
But if you're looking at how much you're going to need, whether you're looking to take out loans, whether you're looking at wages, whether you're enforced holiday pay, holiday leave, all the range of things you can do, retrenchments. I think being conservative is really important at this moment.
Yes.
Otherwise, the difficulty of having to down and start up a company is enormous. That's an incredibly high hurdle. When you lose all that social capital you built up in the company, it takes a lot of time. We've got an incredible group of people at Seesaw, and we're just trying to do everything we can to keep them all and to just get through this and come out the other side. If we can do that, we can focus on development. We're lucky we're in an industry, generally speaking, maybe unlike the cruise industry, which is going to have just demand all through that. There's going to be a demand for content. People are going to watch television. I mean, a bit about theatrical film and maybe some of the pressures on that, but fundamentally, content is a good industry to be. We just need to get through it.
Yes. Just talk about the team for a minute, because your team is incredible. You've got some wonderful people that are part of it. You also have obviously partnering in the UK. I'm interested in what you've learnt from any UK experience that your partners are sharing with you about how they're approaching any of this. If it's exactly the same or it's different. But I'm interested in how you're keeping the band together at the moment. Do you have a regular system of checking in with them at the moment, or is there someone designated to do a group chat every day, or how are you trying to keep everyone united, working, functioning, just as a practical exercise?
Yeah, well, we're very much one company, our UK team and Australian team, and I particularly work very closely, obviously, with my partner Ian and our senior people over there. I think we're all learning at the same time. The UK might be 1 week ahead of us, but it's not like the lessons to be learned from the UK. A couple of our staff members have had the virus and have recovered nicely. So that's been
in the UK, I assume. In the UK.
But,
in the UK.
Oops,
sorry. You're talking about people in the UK.
The UK.
Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
But I think we're doing what everyone's doing, which is moving to Zoom. And although we're on Skype now, but we spend a lot of time on Zoom.
Yes.
Rachel Gardner, who leads the team here in many regards, has been incredible, holding Zoom meetings for the team and just keeping morale up, just instituting very regular calls and making sure that people first are falling through the cracks. Mental health is okay. Everyone goes up and down. One member of our Australian team saved his hair. That shows how I've gotten here. But it is, we're at the early stage of it. This goes for 4 months. I think it's going to be really difficult to really, as you say, to find a way of working in this environment for the moment. And I think we're all aware that there are some disruptions that are taking place in the industries at large, and one of them will be online work, and there might be some, ongoing effect from that.
Well, what are you imagining actually, apart from development, or maybe you could do two things. In terms of talking about development, people are talking, supercharging development, getting more done. I'm wondering what you can do, really, how much you can do in development. What is I'm just trying to, is it about multiple projects, or is it a deeper way of doing development that involves more people, perhaps with some support from some financing to get you or more people across it? I'm trying to think how you use the time productively in that space. And secondly, is there anything that you've thought about doing with the business that is in small guerrilla shoots, and it's not exactly what you're known for, but some businesses have got an archive element that they could consider using, or an animation company can split up its staff and still be reasonably productive. Is there anything that you've thought, actually, we've had that project that we wanted to do and it didn't really fit, but now's the time to roll it out and think about it?
We probably haven't yet thought as deeply about some of those things as you're suggesting we do, so maybe we will.
I'll come and help you.
To take your second question, I think that, as I said before, there's so many contingent elements to mounting a production, and if you can focus on one which is Australia-based, with Australia Pass, you're at least taking out any questions about past travelling and any fears relating around that, or government bans. So whatever you can do to reduce the number of contingent elements is certainly something that we are looking at and is helpful. I think generally on development, I think for us all to remember, if there is a silver lining in this, is that the content providers, the SVOD studios, distributors, still are going to need content going forward, and certainly the more home-based television SVODs need content immediately. And so for some of the shows that we have, which have been finished or in the final stages of production or post-production, which we're able to shepherd through still, the value of those shows, I think, is going up. So I think whatever you've actually got in inventory, so to speak, is actually more valuable than you thought.
Interesting.
And that probably includes development, that there's going to be a continued appetite amongst the SVODs and particularly the international players, I guess, who have really deep pockets, keep the fuel of their economy going, which is to make sure that there are projects that are being developed. But no doubt, maybe if you're ready, we can talk a little bit about how this crisis may intensify some of the disruptive forces at play in the industry, but one of them might be consolidation of some of those players.
Okay. Can we go into what you might think would be valuable in terms of government support from the agencies at the moment? Are you looking for... Look, one of the things that we're doing is feeding back to government constantly about the measures that have happened and aggregating views and bringing together some thoughts around how we can keep certain stimulus happening, and a lot of it is to do with development. That there may be some sort of layers into that around business maintenance and other things that might be valuable. And then there's an element in my mind about how you get as many planes off your runway that you've been talking about as quickly as possible. And that could open up, ideally, a permanent set of changes that we've been thinking about for this industry, but really had not a lot of traction on from government for a long time. Offset changes, SVOD regulation, other things that are going on. But I'm interested in whether there's specific thoughts that you've had around what you could be doing, or what government intersection could do at the moment for the sector, and indeed when we're ready to get a green light and go onwards, properly.
Yeah, it's probably not an area I know a huge amount about. The effect of people who would normally be employed throughout the year, a crew member, first AD or second AD, who might now be forced to go on unemployment benefits, whereas somebody else who is part of a company who's employed, the company might be able to make use of some of those government programs to keep them employed at 80% of salary. That seems like a disjuncture that might be resolvable by government if they could really look at average incomes for a lot of workers who do work, crew members who do work job to job, so they're not disadvantaged by the structural status. I think that, depends on how insurance companies end up pricing in COVID-19 risk. And when they do that, there might be some opportunity for Screen Australia to themselves, as well as to lobby other bodies to take that risk on and underwrite that risk. That would certainly help. I mean, literally just thinking about this now as you ask that question, but it would certainly help the runway problem. If we really want to get back to work, we need Screen Australia and some of the bodies need to look at what are the impediments for the productions to take off. And if they can stopgap any of them for 6 months until the market corrects itself, that could be incredibly helpful. I don't know what they all would be, but certainly the pricing in the risk and whether the risk of COVID-19 is captured by insurance companies is something that I think could be appropriate.
The industry, I think, needs businesses that are able to ramp up quickly, and so maintaining businesses such as yourselves and others in this mix is going to be really important, because the government's going to want to see that we can get people back in employment quickly. I'm picking up a lot of messages around how valuable the government's seeing intellectual property as a valuable asset, and the degree to which businesses have been able to hold IP and retain earnings is going to do them well, while maybe endless reruns of the King's Speech is maybe happening because there's no new content for a while. To the degree to which you get benefits from that, or a business gets benefit from that, I think that's a really important thing. And I'm interested in also thinking through maybe a slight pivot that we've talked about how important it is, and perhaps how odd it's been that you've had a top up for, not that there's anything in any way, of course we have members that sit across all areas, but there has been a 20% offset for television made in this country for streaming services, but if you happen to be an international television production, you get 30%. So in a moment when we've really got to draw on our natural resources in this country, I would have thought there's an opportunity really to look at that particular issue, and how odd it was, and we've talked about this, and I think I've talked about it with a lot of people, how odd it is that we've in the past been incentivising something almost to not be Australian, and really we've got an opportunity to claim that at the moment.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this many times before. I call it the Make It Not Un-Australian campaign, essentially. That logic would dictate that the economic benefits of an Australian production shooting here or an international one would be the same, and then you should have a Australian cultural premium on top of that. So if it was going to be 20% for everybody, if it's Australian, it's 40% or 30%. At the moment, it's actually perversely inverse, and that sends a horrible message to our industry that you're valued more if you're foreign than if you're Australian. Makes no sense. So I think you're right that will intensify the number of disruptive opportunities or processes that were happening anyway. I mean, I had to think about a few of them, and should I go through a couple of them? That makes sense. Makes sense to you, but certainly theatrical windows, I think, will be put under pressure with studios releasing films non-theatrically. So the value of that window will start coming under more scrutiny. I think there's a real question about how theatrical survives in its current form. I think, will theatrical business survive? A lot of it depends on the government support. But the government cannot prop up indefinitely all businesses at every part, at every part of the economy. I produce films not because I've yesterday woke up and said, what's the best thing for me to do? Largely, it's because I produced yesterday in television. And I think most businesses are actually like that. If you're in a theatrical business, you do it because that's the business you know. And there's a lot of capital, intellectual, social, financial wrapped up in that. Those businesses fail. The threshold of which you need to reopen or start a theatrical business is going to be very different to the one to keep business going. And so will there be defined and business plans to start new theatrical exhibition companies, distribution companies? Will people get used to just watching things from home? I mean, that could go either way. Argument that people will bounce back to the cinemas more than ever, but you could equally, we just don't know. People could equally decide that upgraded their television set at some point and they're going to stay home. Older people will take longer, no doubt, to come back to the cinema than younger people, just because until there's a time of the vaccine, it is more dangerous for them. And so that might affect our independent film distribution and exhibition sector, because it is very heavily driven by the sort of audience. Younger people, thankfully, underpin the business more with tentpole films, and I can imagine them jumping back quickly. There's the quotas for Australian broadcasters, which will likely be under more pressure and already is at the moment. So this crisis will naturally act as a catalyst for some of those things. There's the consolidation of the SVOD space, and not just SVOD, all the content providers. We've known for a while that we're at peak content in some way. It could still go up. There was a sense that there are so many homes and tiers for content internationally. At some point, there'll be some aggregation, consolidation, and maybe it might be that moment. So it might end up, prematurely. We thought probably had 5 years of expanding landscape. There still might be a lot of content made, but there might be less number of players. And I've been thinking about a more general one. I've personally been thinking a bit about universal basic income and just how the move in work, the effect of automation and AI on the notion of what work is likely to be profound. And the idea that if you're out of work, you have somehow failed to get work, you should get unemployment benefits, may in the future end up being something that is not appropriate, and that the best way would be to have the universal basic income, which reflects the fact that work might not be readily available for everybody. I think at a moment like this, we are in effect in a place of universal basic income. That's what the government's done. That people, we can't blame people, not that we ever could, but we certainly can't now blame people for not having a job, not their responsibility they're not able to control that. So the community needs to step in and provide the basic income that could help keep things ongoing. And I also think an interesting final thought on this is just move back to the nation state as a primary locus of responsibility. We've been in a world of identity politics for a number of years now. And it's so clear that when something like this happens, it really is the government that to look after us, and they're the ones where where the buck stops. And so politics matters. Our leaders really matter. They are a matter of life in these situations. I think we're not living under Trump America at the moment, and and certainly if government need to increasingly work with other governments that we're all connected. So I think it is a very stimulating moment in terms of thinking and pontificating about the future. No one has any ideas where it will take, where we'll go to. But aside from trawling Twitter and following that, there is something about our industry being one, and we're in a time of job isolation, and I just wonder what will come of creativity with these creative people at home, and many with not that much to do. Those who are able, we can sort out the economic stability and financial stability of people. There might be some unexpected things to come from that.
Emile, I think that's almost a great place to leave our conversation, because not only have you sort of summarised, I think, what we were imagining might be an interesting pathway for the content review, which is no doubt, we don't know where that's going. We've had that conversation. Started talking deeply about the thinking about how society may be indeed reformed. But I think you're right, that's the positive thing. If you see the way creativity is being acknowledged as a way of both a light at the end of the tunnel and the way that people are expressing themselves at moments when they've now got some time to be able to not be doing everything else in their lives, but have got a chance, you're seeing it explode everywhere. And that's, in some ways, it's quite heartening. So it's a really nice way to end a conversation that is, we're not in particularly great circumstances, but there are lots of positive things that can come out of it. Thank you very much for your time today. And I'll just end quickly by thanking everyone for tuning in effectively and providing your comments. We're interested in hearing who you'd like to hear from. Tomorrow, Sarah Hanson-Young is going to be with us, and on Friday, We're going to have the head of Screen Queensland with us, and that's going to be a great opportunity to hear from different people, but always open to your conversations. And in the meantime, look after yourselves and look out for each other. Thank you very much.